Welcome to City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Steph Routh, a member of City Club's Forum Board and producer of today's program. For more than a century, City Club of Portland is where civic-minded people have come together to find solutions to our region's biggest challenges. Today, we're gathered at the Sentinel Hotel and are joined by thousands of people via X-Ray FM and its radio stations at 107.1 and 91.1 FM, KGW's website, Facebook feed, and news app, and OpenSignal's community media television stations. We are incredibly grateful for all the work they do to bring Friday Forum to our community. In addition to City Club's valued media partners, our sponsors, volunteers, and staff enable us to put on Oregon's best civic programs week after week. I'd like to thank AARP Oregon, Avangrid Renewables, and SEIU 49 for their generous support of this and all of our Friday forums this fall. I'd also like to thank the Standard, the Portland's Children's Levy, and United Food and Commercial Workers Local 555 for sponsoring today's program. Please join me in showing our appreciation to everyone who has made this event possible. We'd also like to recognize today, you might have seen some distinguished high school students from Lincoln High School. Congratulations and welcome. And on to our program. Last year, Dan Saltzman decided to retire after 20 years on the Portland City Council. In a statement announcing his decision, he wrote, "I have enjoyed the myriad duties of City Commissioner, and I am very proud of my accomplishments and the relationships I have built while achieving them. But with respect to things I am passionate about, the items on my to-do list largely have check marks next to them." I hope I didn't steal your notes. Okay, great. Today is an opportunity to look at that list of accomplishments and reflect on Dan's 25 years of service in both city and the county government. It's also a chance to look at Portland's future and try to apply some of the lessons learned across more than 2 decades of leadership. What kind of leadership will it take to answer the challenges of a changing city? What insights can Commissioner Saltzman share for the next generation of Portland? Most of you probably know a lot about Dan Saltzman already, but for those of you who don't, Dan Saltzman was born and raised in the Portland area. He graduated from Beaverton High School, received a Bachelor of Science from Cornell University, and a Master's of Science from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He spent many years in the private sector running an environmental engineering firm. He also served as a staff assistant to Congressman, now Senator, Ron Wyden. In 1993, Dan began his public service career as a Multnomah County Commissioner. In 1998, he was elected to the Portland City Council. In his time as a commissioner, this is very long, he has been in charge of more than 15 city bureaus and offices. He currently oversees Portland Fire and Rescue, the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management, the Bureau of Emergency Communications, the Fire and Police Disability and Retirement Fund, Portland Children's Levy, and the Gateway Center for Domestic Violence Services. Dan also served at one point on the board of Portland Community College. Interviewing Commissioner Saltzman today is Emerald Bogue, Regional Affairs Manager at the Port of Portland. That might have been her mom who is here. Emerald has worked in local politics for more than a decade, including policy roles at the City of Portland and Multnomah County. She has also managed multiple political campaigns. Until recently, Emerald was also a member of the City Council's Friday Forum Board. Please join me in welcoming Dan Saltzman and Emerald Bogue.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. And thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, for being on the City Club stage for I don't know how many times you've been here, but
well, I appreciate the invitation, and I feel just as nervous as if it was a debate for a city council office.
You shouldn't.
I do.
Okay. Well, this is an exit interview, so I'm going to start with the most classic of questions. Why are you leaving?
Well, I am leaving City Council because I do feel that, as Stephanie said in her intro, that a lot of the things that I care about, helping children and families, helping survivors of domestic violence, good government, I think I've got an impressive checklist, and I'll be more than happy to talk about that checklist if I get the opportunity. And I just feel that, I just feel ready for something different. And, frankly, leading a less scheduled life.
That sounds nice. So you're an engineer by training. That's a very different field from politics for a number of reasons. Why did you make the leap in the first place?
Well, I heartily recommend more engineers get involved in public policy. I think my galvanizing moments were two. One was when I worked with then Congressman Ron Wyden, the first 4 years he was in Washington. I really saw somebody who worked hard, which can't be said of every member of Congress. Many of them get elected and just fossilize in place. But Ron is a worker to this day, and he was a role model to me. And I guess the other role model, although I'm not a very religious person, I did used to go to Beth Israel Temple a lot when I was younger. I got bar mitzvahed and all that. And I remember just sitting there in services and often staring at the ceiling saying, when is this going to be over? But something sunk in, and I think that was the notion of giving back through public service.
We've certainly done that. So 1998 is very different from 2018 in a number of ways. How did the role change over the years in the way of governing in city government?
I think for one thing, governing has gotten a lot tougher in the last 20 years. People are much more disruptive now of city council meetings, feeling that they are entitled to shout down other people who are there to give their opinions. And I think it's as a result we have fewer people showing up at city council meetings now, true, real people showing up to provide their input because they're, quite frankly, they still remember the images of city council meetings being disrupted, and they're still disrupted. So I think the discourse has gotten a lot less civil between the public and the city council, and that's a concern.
What do you think can be done to address that?
Well, I think we have certainly we've beefed up our procedures for every council meeting now. Before we begin, our attorney reads a message to the public saying welcome, and you all have a chance to testify. But if you're disruptive, you will be ejected. And unfortunately, that happens almost on a routine basis now.
Are you seeing that making a difference in the way of, as you said, people coming to give testimony on the city's business?
Yes, I mean, in my belief, most average residents of Portland will not show up to testify on an issue anymore because they have the perceptions that the meetings are disruptive and that they are a chaotic environment and that they could be shouted down or insulted. And so I think that has resulted in fewer people coming to council meetings. And I think, I've just been thinking about this too. I think if you realize that, maybe in a city of 600,000 people, probably fewer than 5% of people have ever been in City Hall, testified, probably far fewer have ever testified at a city council meeting or a public hearing we do out in the community. That's a concern, that fewer and fewer people are taking time to express their point of view.
Got it. Switching topics, what is your proudest accomplishment besides the Children's Levy, which I promise you we'll get to?
Okay, well, I do have, I did prepare a list of my top 11 accomplishments, and I know 11's an odd number, it should be 10, but since you're taking the Children's Levy off, it's 10.
All right, well, I promise you we'll talk about it.
Okay, can I run through them real quickly?
Yeah.
Okay.
By all means.
And these are in no particular order. These are just things that, looking over my 20 years, that I'm most proud about. One, I created the Gateway Center for Domestic Violence Services, which is helping nearly 4,000 survivors this year to get the help they need. I secured the land for Bridge Meadows in North Portland so it could become a reality, providing foster children, adoptive homes, and families, and grandparents in a community village-like setting. I found a permanent home for the Miracles Club and built sober housing to go with the alcohol drug-free social club. Secured voter approval of reforms to the fire, police, disability, and retirement system to save taxpayer dollars while providing fair benefits to our firefighters and police. completed the Big Pipe project to clean up the Willamette River, the largest public works project in the city's history, and it was on time and on budget. Secured voter approval of Portland's first affordable housing bond measure. Secured both legislative and city council approval of inclusionary housing, which requires all new residential development to include affordable units. And if I could add, over time, this will produce far more affordable housing than will any bond measures. I hired a smart new fire chief who shares my vision of making our 31 fire stations into centers for community health, in addition to fire safety. I authored the preference policy for predominantly African American families displaced by urban renewal to have priority access to city-owned or financed housing in North and Northeast Portland. And lastly, I cast the third and decisive votes to bring the Portland Timbers to Providence Park. Very timely right now. And to build the aerial tram. So those are my top 11.
Top 11, and the truth is we could actually have a Friday forum about every single one of those topics.
Right.
Really and truly, those are huge accomplishments. So let's talk about the children's levy.
Okay.
The last couple renewals passed with flying colors, but its inception wasn't quite so easy. Can you talk a little bit about why you started that in the first place, and what it took to get it over the line and what it means to you?
Well, I started the children's levy as a result of my conviction that we needed to make children a higher priority in the city. And I remember as a candidate for the county commission going to the various unions, and one of them was the Multnomah County Deputy Sheriff's Association. And I talked to them, of course, about how we need to make children a higher priority. And they kind of shot back at me in a snarky way, like, why is public safety always put on a special levy basis, and then things like that are funded in the base? And I thought about that, and I said, well, you have a point. And so years later, when I got to the city council, I decided if we're going to make children a higher priority, we should actually identify a funding source, seek voter approval of it, and that's what we did. And we did it in large part because the business community was also coming around to the notion that investing in early education, in after-school education, early childhood learning, were things that helped reduce the pipeline in the criminal justice system. And they came around to that point of view. And the children's levy probably would not have been successful if it wasn't for the fact that the then Chamber of Commerce and Association for Portland Progress, which are now merged as the Portland Business Alliance, had not supported it. And they supported it, and that was pretty revolutionary for them to support something like that back then. And then ultimately the voters supported it too. But it was tough. I mean, it was tough in convincing people that why is the city doing this? Why not the county? That's still an issue people ask about. My response is, we just can't, sit around in government and say, well, that's really something another government entity should do. If we have the ability to do it ourselves, we should do it. And we've done that. And as you said, we've been renewed now 4 times. The last time with 83% of the vote. Wow. So, yeah. And I just want to add that we didn't just create a funding source and say we're going to give money out. We structured it in a very accountable way. We have an allocation committee that consists of county and city representatives as well as citizen representatives. And we have a 5% limit on our own administrative expenses. And we invest in programs that work, only programs that have a proven track record of success. We don't invest in pilot projects or demonstration projects. That's for the foundation world.
Excellent. What's your hope for the children's levy going forward?
Well, I hope Mayor Ted Wheeler has graciously agreed to assume the leadership as the chair of the allocation committee and also the commissioner in charge of the children's levy. County Chair Deborah Kafori also serves on the allocation committee. It's my hope that they will see the value of this, and when it comes time in 4 or 5 years to renew it again, that we can count on them to do the gritty work that needs to be done in a campaign, which is raise funds, secure endorsements, all those things, as Emerald well knows, since she ran one of our renewal campaigns for the Children's Levy.
I did. It was awesome. What's your favorite Portland park?
I would have to say that I really enjoy the Hoyt Arboretum. It's a place I really love to go and walk. I'm sort of in between dogs right now, but when I have dogs, I love to walk them on leashes. So yeah, I'd have to say probably Hoyt Arboretum.
Awesome. Let's talk about the commission form of government.
Okay.
It's been approved by voters multiple times, but is almost openly loathed among folks who have worked within it or closely to it. What are your thoughts on the form of government? And do you think Portland voters should consider other forms?
Well, I can argue both the pros and cons of the commission form of government. Certainly one of the cons, which I think frustrates a lot of people, is the fact that people that we're each in charge of different bureaus, and it makes getting things done, if you're involving 2 or 3 more bureaus under different commissioners, it makes things very difficult to get done unless there's a certain unity amongst your colleagues that this needs to be done. Otherwise, either one of my colleagues, can really thwart something from being done. It also results, I believe, in sort of an imperial feeling amongst us that we are the king or queens of our domain, and that we're defined by our bureau assignments. So when the budget process comes around and we're supposed to be acting as a board of directors, we don't. We basically act, we pretend we're a board of directors, but we're really gunning for our bureaus. We're looking out for our own bureaus. And that inhibits good collective thinking, particularly long-term thinking. I think long-term thinking is something we're not very good at. I mean, we have people in city government who are very good at long-term thinking, identifying the issues, but we as the city council, we pay token, yeah, these are long-term issues, they got to be addressed, but we're not really good at really coming up with the solutions to address them. And as to alternatives, I do think that, I think there are alternatives out there. As you said, the people seem enamored with commission form of government, but I also know the last time it was asked, I think was over probably 20 years ago, and a lot of people have moved to Portland since then. And I think it's, I think it is fair game. I know the City Club's taking a look at that. I know the League of Women Voters are taking a look at it. I do think it's fair game, perhaps to pose a new form of government. I'm not necessarily sure which form I would recommend, but I think it's fair game to ask voters. And I also think it's fair game to state at the outset, you'll never get that change from within the City Council. It will have to come from without.
That's interesting. Are there any particular models that intrigue you?
Well, we have talked a little bit about this. I am intrigued by the notion of perhaps commissioners and the mayor are elected to a finite number of years, one term. It's like, it's the Mexico model, and nobody sort of, everybody kind of politely nods when I mention the Mexico model, but their president serves a 6-year term, and that's it. So I would suggest maybe we consider an 8-year term for commissioners and mayors, and that's it. It is a term limit, but you don't have to run for a re-election. So you get that 8 years to really focus on doing your job, getting done what you want to get done, and not worrying about re-election, which we all worry about re-election.
How long does it take to learn the job?
I think, by a couple of years, you've got your feet under yourself.
Yeah.
But I know the first year I was there, it was like I felt like I didn't say a word because I was just in awe of everything. But so I'd say, 2 years and you've got your feet under yourself.
And you were coming from the county?
And I was coming from the county.
Yeah. So until there's a different form of government, this is the one that we have. So what does it take to work within this form of government and to do it well? How have you done it?
I think it takes recognizing that being on the city council is like being married. You can have your fights, but the next day you're going to have to get along. And while you may be vehemently opposed to what's being done one day by one of your colleagues, the next day you may be the two co-sponsoring an item. And I think it's kind of recognizing that the mayor, he or she, is kind of the parental figure. So it's like the four commissioners are like the children, and the mayor is the father or the mother, because we're always going to the mayor to ask for favors, to get little things included in the budget. It's like asking for your allowance or privileges to use the car. So I think you just have to recognize those are sort of the human dynamics of being on the city council, and they're not too different from what we all experience every day from being a parent or being a family member or a sibling.
What does the mayor need to do to work well in that form of government?
Well, the mayor, in our form of government, the mayor's chief power, the mayor is the leader of the city, but once the mayor makes bureau assignments, those bureaus become sort of, as I said earlier, the domain of the commissioners in charge. And there's not much the mayor could do at that point, other than sort of threaten to reassign bureaus, which that threat, in my opinion, should be made more often, but doesn't. If I was mayor, I'd probably be reassigning bureaus too frequently. But that is the one threat that gets our attention, the threat of losing a bureau, especially if we've landed a bureau we really like, and there's certain bureaus that are more well-liked than others. And the mayor, gets all the grief. I found both as being housing commissioner and being police commissioner, it made no difference when there was a contentious issue. People go straight to the mayor, and that's true to this day, whether it's public safety or homelessness issues. It doesn't matter if somebody else is in charge of housing and homelessness or somebody else is in charge of the police bureau. Those issues are blamed on the mayor and go straight to the mayor.
For our radio audience, this is City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Emerald Bogue, and I'm speaking with retiring Portland City Commissioner Dan Saltzman. So, Commissioner, did you ever consider running for mayor?
I'm sure I gave it some thought, but never seriously. I like very much being a city commissioner, and I like the responsibility that goes with it, and the ability to get things done, the ability to, one of the great things about these jobs is you can see a story on the news, and get angry about it, and if it has a local connection, you can maybe even do something about it. So I like that ability, but being mayor, I'm not known as a very social person, and being mayor, you don't have much ability to say no to things. There's so many events you just have to go to because you're the mayor. There's so many events you get invited to because you're the mayor. So as a city commissioner, I had more ability to say, I would argue, a better balance, a work-life balance, and I don't think mayors have that ability. So for those reasons, largely, I never thought of running for mayor.
Got it. What makes a really good commissioner?
I think that you have to recognize the ability, I would say what makes a good commissioner is having an agenda. When I ran for this office, my three reasons I ran for this office have remained the same over these years. One is helping children and families, 2 is protecting our environment, and 3 is reducing the cost of government. And I think everything I've identified to you in the last bit about my accomplishments falls under one of those 3 headings. So I would say, have some consistent goals, and then, make that into a tangible agenda, and be bold. Don't be afraid to fail. I've failed on plenty of things I've tried too. But that shouldn't be, people want you to try. They want to see the earnest effort of trying to get something done, trying to be bold. And I think that's something that, people in elected office are too timid these days about that.
Do you think it's a harder time to have that kind of an agenda?
Well, it all depends, I think, how much resources are involved in achieving that agenda.
Yeah.
Certainly, something like children's levy, I recognized it was going to cost money, and so we asked voters to approve more money, and thankfully they did. But we have been in some good times over the last 4 years. The economy is rolling, and when the economy is rolling, our coffers are also flush. So there has been a lot of time to pursue new initiatives, but I don't think people often do that, or people will often hijack the process, and we end up spending money on things that really aren't worth spending on.
Looking over the last 20 years, who's been great to work with on council? Aside from everyone, of course.
I mean,
but who stands out as a really, really good colleague?
Well, I've enjoyed, as you said, working with everybody over the last 20 years, but certainly I learned a lot from Vera Katz. She was mayor when I first got elected, and I learned a lot from just sitting next to her. And certainly I worked really well with Commissioner Eric Sten, and then Mayor Charlie Hales. And I think, I've worked well with Mayor Ted Wheeler. I think those are people I think I've worked the best with over the years.
What is it about their approaches that's worked for you? Is it all different, or do they all have a common characteristic?
I think they've all been able to embrace ideas that they weren't necessarily their own ideas, and be receptive to the fact be respectful to the fact that if I'm asking for something, or any other commissioner, that you're asking as a colleague, and you deserve to be at least respected, if not, if your proposal doesn't get outright dismissed, which does happen, but to at least be respectful of one another and listen. And I think, both Eric Sten and Charlie Hills were not sort of children types, but they were the 2 votes I needed to get the children's levy to the ballot the first time. And the first time was the hardest time. And Vera Katz, Vera was just, she really sort of was the last really strong mayor that we've had. All mayors since then have been one term. And Vera was able to do things that, she was able to get away with things that, the mayors since then have not been able to get away with. She had a very strong personality. She wasn't afraid to put people in their place. And she was very brash. It was that sort of New Yorker in her. But it worked. And she was also, very much of the people too. Vera was out shopping, out walking around, talking to people. And I'm not saying the other mayors haven't done that as well, but she was able to do that. And Ted, I think, Ted Wheeler is a very principled person. I think he does worry about the big issues and does worry about how government gets its services done. And I think he has embraced issues around homelessness and housing as his own, and has really made priorities of that, as well as running the police bureau. So I think that's it.
That's good. What's your favorite city besides Portland?
New York, without a doubt. I love to go to New York City. My daughter currently lives in Brooklyn. But yeah, Liz and I, my partner, we always love to go to New York.
Awesome. You've held every bureau with the exception of those that the mayor rarely ever parts with. And I mean, I'll add the police bureau to that, right. which was uncommon. Any favorites? Well,
aside from the Gateway Center and the Children's Levy, I would say some of my favorite bureaus have been, the Bureau of Environmental Services. When I first got elected, I was very determined to work on environmental issues, and I felt my background as an environmental engineer made a good fit. So I really enjoyed that bureau, and as I said, we delivered the Big Pipe project on time and on budget, but we also fostered new ways of thinking in terms of the built environment and doing things differently. I created the Office of Sustainable Development, which has now been merged into the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. But at the time, in the early 2000s, providing a city focus on doing things differently and more sustainably, and lessening the built environment's impact on our natural environment was kind of a new thought. And so I was very happy about that bureau being formed and ultimately being successful. And I've certainly enjoyed being the fire commissioner in charge of Portland Fire and Rescue, and also the Portland Housing Bureau, and as well as a parks commissioner. We all love being parks commissioner.
Do you have a biggest regret?
Maybe my only regret is that, I talked a little bit about having the proper work-life balance in these jobs, and I think that I, like a lot of my colleagues, we get too absorbed in our job, and we're not, I probably wasn't the best father in the world, put it that way. Probably wasn't around for all the things that I should have been around for, because I was either, not there because I had some meeting to be at, or I was too absorbed in an issue to really come out of that shell of just being totally absorbed about how you're going to vote on something. So yeah, having that work-life balance, and I would urge all my colleagues and those future colleagues to really make that a priority.
Do you think that there's ways to make that a priority, or to sort of adjust the culture going forward so that people with families feel better about entering council and public life?
I don't know if there's a dynamic out there that's something that we can do in terms of changing our rules or our procedures. I think it's something that a candidate just has to realize they're going to make that a priority. And that may mean, going to one less meeting at night, maybe more than one less meeting at night, and just sort of learning. It's very hard to leave this job at the office. I will admit that. And I will say one thing, that I think Portlanders are very good at respecting our privacy. I've never had rarely had people come up and be disruptive to me when I'm sort of off duty, at a restaurant or something like that. People respect your privacy, and so I want to thank Portlanders for doing that.
Very good. You've talked a little bit about votes that you're proud of, but do you have a proudest vote?
Well, as I said, I think those two votes around the aerial tram and bringing the timbers to Providence Park were probably two of my proudest votes.
Awesome. Do you have a celebrity encounter over the last 20 years on council that stands out? And it could be the nerdiest celebrity. It doesn't have to be a Hollywood A-lister.
Okay. Well, I never got asked to play any roles in Portlandia or anything like that. I would say, Thomas Lauderdale, does he count as a celebrity?
Totally.
Yeah. Well, Thomas is a big fan of mine. Yeah. So Thomas Lauderdale would probably be, and Storm Large. They were both big fans of mine. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Policy making at the city sometimes comes down to the zero-sum game of either being considered pro-business or progressive. What do you think the opportunities are to break through that dichotomy, and how have you thought about it in your time?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I do think that people, some of my colleagues, past and present, tend to be too black and white about this issue. That if you're the Portland Business Alliance, you're the force of darkness. Well, the Portland Business Alliance also represents, over 1,400 businesses, large and small. And, I think business people work very, very hard, especially small businesses, especially those in the restaurant business. But I am just constantly amazed how hard people work. And, their voices need to be heard too. And it's just not black and white. And as I said, I've always had a good relationship with the Portland Business Alliance. That doesn't mean I agree with everything they've said or done. And by the same token, there's organizations that are more from the cloth I'm cut from, environmental organizations or children's organizations that also I don't agree with every position or tactic they undertake. But I do think we have to be balanced. I think we owe it to ourselves to listen to all sides. And I don't know if you're going to ask this question, but maybe you will, or maybe I'll just answer it right now. But
you can just go for it.
In terms of what advice I would give for the new commissioner coming in, or any new commissioner, is you also have a duty to talk to the press. We tend to want to, yeah. It's not a choice, it's an obligation, in my opinion. People rely on the press to find out what's going on. They don't very few of us watch cable TV or watch us on TV. They know about us, what they read or hear on the radio or see on the TV. And I think some of us tend to pick and choose when we'll talk to the media. We want to talk to them when we have something to crow about, but when they're investigating one of our bureaus about something, we're suddenly not around or we don't have a comment. And I've never been like that. I have always faced the media, thick or thin, good or bad, because I feel it's a duty, it's an obligation.
Excellent. Looking back at your time at the city and the county, can you think of anything that you and your colleagues could have done differently or should have done differently as it relates to housing and homelessness? So much has been done in the last several years. But when you look back, do you think, gosh, we should have done this 10 years ago, or we should have employed this other model, or anything?
I think, I think there's a lot of things we probably should have done sooner. I think the issues around housing, affordable housing and homelessness, quite frankly, caught us by surprise, relatively speaking, in terms of their scale. The relative rapid rise of unaffordable housing and the rapid rise in the homeless population, I think really caught us by surprise. And I'm not saying it's unique to Portland, but if we had done things like form the Joint Office of Homeless Services, which we formed about 4 years ago, where the city and the county really pool their resources together and eliminate inefficiencies, I think, and also do great things like set up a unified screening criteria for people to get into permanent supportive housing. Instead of having to run around to each organization to find a bed or an apartment, they can now, anybody, any caseworker in the county who works for the county or works for a nonprofit can apply that screening criteria, and all the beds that are available or all the units that are available are collectively available. So it makes it a lot easier. So I think there's a lot of things we should have done sooner in that regard. And we should have, of course, passed a Portland housing bond, a Metro regional housing bond sooner.
Well, I'm glad we did.
Yeah, I am too.
Eventually. And again, on housing and homelessness, are we, from your perspective, is this a structural problem? Is this a funding and resource problem, or some combination thereof?
Well, I think it's, we are certainly putting in a lot of resources between the city and the county and Home Forward and now Metro on affordable housing. I think it's really, I've never ascribed to this notion of a 10-year plan to eliminate homelessness. I've always thought that was, just not a realistic goal. And I still don't. I mean, there's always going to be a chronic homeless population. But there are so many people who are not part of that chronic population that we need to provide more housing for, more affordable units. And I think when people, and we know that when we get people into housing, especially if we have services that can keep them in that housing, they are going to be successful and not end up on the streets again. So we can make a difference, but we're never going to reduce the problem to zero, in my opinion.
Really serious question. Voodoo or Blue Star donuts?
Well, I'll have to say Voodoo, because I've actually never tried Blue Star.
I will personally make sure that changes.
Okay.
You did share some advice for the incoming commissioner as it relates to always talking to the media. Is there anything else you want to say as it relates to coming in on this job?
Well, as I said also earlier, I think it's incumbent upon any commissioner to come in to have an agenda and to have some sort of some goalposts that help guide your decision-making on issues that you never thought you'd be making a decision on, something like forming local improvement districts or sewer and water rates, but to have some goalposts that help you serve as your metrics to make those types of decisions. But as I said, have an agenda, have 3 or 4 things that you want to get done in your first term or your first and second terms, and really, go to the mat for them. Now, I don't think my incoming successor is probably going to have any problem doing that, Joanne Hardesty. She strikes me as somebody that will go to the mat on stuff, but it's go to the mat to make a difference, to get the results, not just to necessarily win the rhetorical debate.
What are the biggest joys of the job?
Well, I certainly, I think I, like a lot of elected officials, we have relatively large egos. We like the power of the job. We like the fact that, everybody calls us commissioner or mayor or whatever. And so I think, we get invitations to everything. So if you really wanted to be one of these types that just goes to events, speaks at luncheons and all that, you can spend your whole career doing that. And, unfortunately, I think some colleagues I've served with, that's all they do, is they do the sort of the ceremonial aspects of the job and get little done on the substantive aspects of the job. So I think that that is something it's good to have. And, I know when I leave office in a few weeks that I will be, I will have, my opinion will count for less on matters.
For our radio audience, this is City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Emerald Bogue, and I'm speaking with retiring Portland City Commissioner Dan Saltzman. We're now going to go to the audience for some questions. Everyone watching or listening today is welcome to ask a question. If you've written a question on an index card, hold it up high for City Club staff to collect. You may also submit questions via Twitter using the hashtag #FridayForum. To City Club members who would like to ask a question on the microphone, please identify yourself as a member and ask one question in 30 seconds or less. And as a reminder, I would love to get some students up as well. You guys, don't be shy.
Ted Kay, City Club member. Dan, thinking about the division of responsibilities between the city, the county, and Metro, would you comment on how those are divided and if those could be improved, and how the relations between the three entities might be improved?
Well, I think as I mentioned, the Joint Office of Homeless Services was really a great way to try to overcome some of the historical divisions of the city and the county on issues like that. We were all sort of doing our own thing with our own resources, and now we've really pooled those resources together, and I think we're getting a lot more done in that regard. And there's still issues out there that have been talked about for a long time in terms of annexations and things like that. It seems to me it would make a lot of sense if the bridges were run by the city of Portland and not Multnomah County. It seems like it's more intrinsic as part of our mission and what we do and part of the transportation system. I do think that, I think Metro is doing a great job. I think they, on the big issues around land use planning and, coming up with an affordable housing bond that passed with voters. I give them a lot of credit for that. And I do think overall, I think we work pretty well together. But that's sort of an intentional effort that has to be, you got to wake up every morning and make sure that remains true, because it is very easy, all too easy to start throwing darts at each other too.
Promise King, City Club member. I think probably the only past reporter or journalist that have worked in City Hall. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity. But that is not the question. My question is, you were very adamant in paving the way for Rosa Park Street. Mm-hmm. Why did you do that?
Well, thanks, Promise, because I know you worked with me on that issue. I did it because it was something that was important to many members in the African American community, that we have a street that commemorates Rosa Parks, and so street namings are something we generally stay away from because they generally are no-win situations. But I felt this was worth doing, and I had a lot of support from the African American faith community to do it. And I think that helped to overcome a lot of the reticence my colleagues had on, oh God, a street renaming. We don't want to do that again. And so, you know, today I'm very proud. Every time I drive by Rosa Parks Way, I'm very proud about that. And I think
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Promise.
Good afternoon. It's wonderful to hear kind words about the media and encouraging elected officials to work with the media, because we are often the voice of the community, or a community. Chris Andre, City Club member. My question is regarding homeless situations. Other communities and cities have had great success with taking the few of the most chronic members of the city citizens who are repeat visitors to emergency rooms and to jails, as you said, and take care of them, get them housed, and then address problems with addiction or some sort of mental
We need you to
illness.
get to the question.
So why have you considered that? If so, why and why not?
Well, I think we have considered that. I'm very pleased that we are doing a number of things. I want to start by commending Portland Fire and Rescue. They have a program that works with sort of the chronic, a lot of the chronic emergency room visitors to visit them when they're out of the emergency room and help them get the resources they need to stay out of the emergency room. So we have a great program going on there. And we have a firefighter who's dedicated, I think it's Tremaine Johnson, who's dedicated to doing that. But also, this whole notion of what we call permanent supportive housing, which my colleague Commissioner Fish has been the most outspoken advocate for that. But that's the whole idea of you don't just put people in an apartment and expect they're going to be successful if they have a number of issues, addiction, whatever. So that's why you link it with services, and that's why they call it permanent supportive housing. It's housing where the services to be successful in that housing come with it. And a lot more and more of our housing that we subsidize or finance is of the supportive model. It's kind of the thing to do these days, and it really is successful.
Hi, Commissioner. My name is Sebastian Chevalier. I'm a senior at Lincoln High School, and I'm also a member of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. So in regards of policing, my question is, during your time as Commissioner, how's the relationship between the community and the police progressed or regressed in your perspective?
Thanks, Sebastian. Thank you for the question, and thanks for your service on the Community Engagement Committee. You know, it all depends kind of where you sit. If you sit in council chambers and go by what the people who show up there to almost routinely criticize the police, you would think things are terrible. But if you get out of the council chambers and ask most people what they think of the Portland police, I think most of them have very high remarks. It's not to say we don't screw up. The police, it's not to say there aren't bad apples and there aren't mistakes made. But by and large, I think our police do a great job. They do a very difficult job. And I think Portland police bring a lot of compassion to the work that they do. They care about the people that they may have to arrest, but they do care about them. So it's a tough place, and it all depends, I think, where you sit.
Hello, my name is Sadie Nelson. I'm a sophomore at Lincoln High School, and I would first like to start off by saying thank you for everything that you've done. In recent years, Portland has faced many conflicts regarding freedom of speech with Antifa and the alt-right meeting. How do you think we can strike a happy medium between the two diverse viewpoints without violating or restricting freedom of speech?
Thanks, Sadie. That's a very
It's a very good question.
very good question and a very timely question. As you may know, the mayor brought forward a proposal this week that many people viewed, including a majority of my colleagues, as unduly restricting free speech, so it did not pass. I did support it, however, because I am really worried that we are going to have a situation where somebody gets seriously injured, maimed, or God forbid, even killed in these confrontations that develop between. There's more than two sides, and not everybody is of the same extremes, but the extreme elements are there, and I think they're there. They want to provoke each other, and that's why they. In my opinion, that's why they were so against the idea that we could say, well, you can have your rally here in one block, and the counter protesters, you can have your rally too, but it's going to be a block away. But no, I think the reason, in my opinion, they were so profoundly opposed to this idea, I mean, certainly they invoked this free speech and First Amendment and all that, is because the extreme elements really want to provoke one another, and they ultimately want to provoke the police getting involved. And the police often find themselves in the middle of this, all too often in the middle of this, and then everybody turns on the police, and everybody's only complaining about police behavior. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer, certainly not a constitutional scholar. I just felt that this was something that we need to do to keep Portlanders safe, and I'm really worried what's going to happen this Saturday or even in future protests.
Hello, Commissioner. I'm Anthony Shaw. I'm a current student at Portland Community College, as well as a presidential executive intern there. I've had backgrounds and I'm working with as a public employee through internships, and as a public employee yourself, what is your advice to people, especially young people and students who may want to pursue a career in public service?
The great question, and having served on the PCC board for 10 years, I'm a big fan of PCC. I think both the city and the county offer what's called the Summer Works program, where we offer paid internships for young people to work. I've had them work in my office, they work in the bureaus, and I think that's one avenue you should definitely explore. Or even if it's not a paid internship, just approaching us and asking us about internships. One of the things I'm proudest about is the internships I've provided to foster kids over the years, and I really think that really gives them an opportunity to see government from the inside and to be effective. And you also get to know people, and that's important for networking as well.
Hello, Commissioner. I'm Mei Xu from Lincoln High School, and I'm a sophomore. And regarding homelessness, I have a question because in California, all homeless shelters are required to accept people, no matter if they struggle with a mental illness or an addiction. So in Portland, do we have something similar to that? And how do we reach out to people who struggle with addiction and mental illness and are afraid to kind of reach out to these shelters?
Thanks, Mei Xu. I don't know whether I think most of our shelters are what we call low barrier, meaning if you have a substance abuse issue, that doesn't preclude you from getting into the shelter. I mean, some shelters, those run primarily by sort of the nonprofit religious groups, have more stronger requirements about being sort of clean and sober or committing to being clean and sober. But most of the shelters that we fund at the city are not like that. They're open to all, including those who have serious mental health issues. So I'm not sure what California exactly does, but that's pretty much what we do here.
Question from the audience. Do you support rent control or rent stabilization as a tool to reduce homelessness?
I am not sure. I was thankful that issue hasn't come up during my tenure, because it's one of those issues, that I'm really not, I haven't invested enough time on the pros and cons. I mean, I've heard enough arguments against it from people who I respect and people who are also homeless advocates to say that it's probably not the panacea that we would be looking for to solve homelessness. But I did pass, as a city commissioner, I did pass an ordinance that requires rent increases, any rent increases above 10%, have to be, and Commissioner Udaley passed a subsequent ordinance that if anybody has a rent increase beyond 10%, they have the right to ask for relocation costs, and landlords must pay those relocation costs. And so I think we've gotten at it. I'm not sure outright rent control is the solution we're looking for, however.
One more question, if it's quick.
Kurt Roybring, member. Portland is currently a sanctuary city. How can we make sure that the Trump administration's attempt to invalidate this will not prevail?
Well, I think so far we're doing pretty good. Most federal judges that have considered this issue have ruled in the favor of the cities. And I think we just joined another lawsuit, yet again, challenging the ability to threaten our sanctuary status. So, there's nothing we can pass locally that insulates us from what the federal government may try to do. But I think, we have shown, I think the city of Portland has shown a pretty firm resolve that we're going to remain a sanctuary city, even if you threaten to take all away our federal grants. That we will, we're not going to compromise our values for dollars.
And with that, Commissioner Saltzman, I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here today, and it's truly an honor to appear before you. And I simply wanted to say that I just wanted to give an opportunity to thank all the staff and interns that have worked for me over 20 years. My staff is like my family, and so I really appreciate that. And I do want to also thank my family, both my sisters, Julie and Barb, and their husbands, Eric and Randy. And I do want to say, the loves of my life, my daughter Adrienne, and Liz Burns, who is here today too. Both have stood by me through good and bad times, and I could not have done this job without their love, which was always unquestioning. And then my final advice to Portlanders is, and I'll quote somebody. I usually never quote people when I'm giving speeches or testifying. I just don't do that. But I'm going to quote somebody you maybe have all heard of. Her name's Jewel. She's a singer. And I don't know if she wrote this, but she sang it. And it's, in the end, only kindness matters. So be kind to one another. There's no room for being disrespectful or saying things that are hateful or hurtful to one another. Thank you, City Club.
And on that great note, our time is up and we're adjourned. Please join me in thanking Steph Routh for producing today's program, Lincoln High students for their thoughtful questions, and Dan Saltzman for his years of service and insights shared today. Thank you.